So this is what a person is made up of. That's what a person is. Like the name is just the person. But what is a person? A person is 5 heaps. And so that's form, meaning the body. Then is sensations. This is one of the mental factors. Recognition or discrimination, which is another one. And then compositional factors, which are all the other mental factors, and main consciousness. This is what we did a little bit yesterday. Yeah. Why are sensations and discrimination pulled out of the 51 mental factors? Because they create what is called this cyclic existence or samsara. Because we have sensations, and then we get attached to the pleasant ones, and we have aversion to the negative ones, and we don't know that, we don't see that they are totally the same. Is pleasant and unpleasant is totally the same?
Doesn't feel like this.
Huh?
Doesn't feel like this.
Doesn't feel like that. So they're not the same experience, but they're the same in being impermanent, bound to suffering, and having no substance. But we make them so different, like totally opposite. They're not. So one tries to see in what they are the same. So we're not kind of going like crazy for the pleasant ones, and we're not so afraid of the unpleasant ones anymore. But because we're clinging to pleasurable experiences, this what creates rebirth. This is the mind clings, the mind is yearning for pleasant experiences, being afraid of painful experiences, and then that yearning for pleasant experiences throws the mind into next rebirth, taking on a body because you need a body in order to have these sensations that come from outside pleasures. So this is what is, like when they talk about cyclic existence, we'll talk about that tomorrow. Samsara, this is what samsara is. The definition of samsara is taking on these 5 contaminated aggregates again and again and again and again, under the control of karma and delusions or afflictive emotions. This is what this is what samsara is. Samsara is not Israel or Syria and Switzerland is Nirvana or anything like that. It's not like that. Samsara means having no choice. As long as we have this feeling of independent me or I, that feeling will throw the mind going to look for another existence. The same way as when at night you wake up and you have this feeling of falling, whether you want or not, your mind will start grasping at identity. Who am I? Because that I needs identity, otherwise it cannot exist. So all your mind is like a kind of a construct, is a mental construct. One part of it. The other part of it is innate. Yeah, there is like two of these eyes. One is learned, and the other one is innate, like we're born with it. Yeah, like for example, I Swiss, that is totally learned. But I react when people say something about Switzerland, same way as you react when somebody says something about Israel. But that is a learned I that reacts. Yeah, if I would have been born 50 kilometers north, I would have an eye German. Or 80 kilometers west, I would have an eye French. But at the moment, I have an eye Swiss. So this is what it is. So, so we have 5 of these heaps that create samsara. So when you go down on the 5 points, you go down on the hands, then on the knees, and then you touch your forehead. That is symbolic for wanting to purify these 5 contaminated aggregates into the 5 wisdoms of the 5 Buddha families. Again, it's like a vast topic. We're not going into it. So then you go down on these 5 points and you push yourself up very quickly. That means coming out of samsara very fast, of this suffering cyclic existence. And as you come up, you drag your hands a little bit on the floor, and that means you're taking everybody out with you. Now, in one prostration, this can be totally there, and then the prostration becomes very meaningful. Or you just do zang 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 3 times and your mind is totally somewhere else. Then at least the body has created positive karma. So that is the significance of a prostration. Do you have questions?
when we do this, what does it
Yeah,
symbolize?
this is like when you do the long prostrations, you think that the blessing is coming kind of as a shower over you or something like that. You know, if you do a lot of prostrations, people, they're there, they just go like that and then come up again. So you can do short prostrations, as I do in the morning, or you can do long prostrations as they do before the first session. And these long prostrations, they're especially for purification, because you do the long prostrations, you visualize light coming into your body that purifies the negative karma of your body. Then you recite the names of the 35 Buddhas. Me, I get a lot of merit because I'm reciting them every morning without having to recite them. So, but you should really, you should recite the names with me, because otherwise you don't purify the speech. So that by reciting the names of these 35 Buddhas, you purify your speech. And by visualizing that each time you go down, one of these, we don't have a picture, one of these 35 Buddhas, they look the same but they have different colors. They come into you and absorbs into your Buddha nature to wake it up. So that's what you do in the morning. It's a great way to start the day, really. If people see you at home and they say, oh, you shouldn't bow, you can say, this is Tibetan yoga. Because you need to do them in a very exact way, by the way. It's not just any old way, throwing yourself on the floor. You know, the way you hold your fingers, the way you hold your hands, the way you do it. This is in a... Because it has to do with your subtle energy channels also. So if you do yoga, nobody says you shouldn't bow when you do this salute to the sun, isn't it?
Right.
That is not a problem. It's the same thing. So what you're bowing to is your own potential of becoming Buddha. By using the outer Buddha as a support.
Can you give us the name of the 35 Buddhas?
Can I what?
Give us the list, all the names of the 35
Sure, no problem. Everywhere in all the books, in all the... Huh? What?
I don't have the text.
We must look at the text.
We have, I think we have. It's in the Kopan prayer books and or practice books, and I can send it to you by email if you want. Just the text, just the names of the 35 Buddhas, plus the text what that comes with it, because it's not just reciting the names. It's called, this teaching is called, or this practice is called the Sutra of the Three Heaps. That's why it doesn't work. The Sutra of the Three Heaps. So what are the three heaps? The three heaps is like first you recite these names, and then the first heap is you confess. You say, whatever I did in my past lives, the body, speech, and mind, if I did this action and that action and that action and that action, I confess it. That's the first heap. Then the second heap is you rejoice. You rejoice about all the good things that you've done. And the third heap is that you dedicate. So if you want to know what it is, just come tomorrow at 6 o'clock, and then you have the recording and you do the prostrations with it, and keeps you very fit. Since I have my knee operation done, I can't really do this properly anymore, and so I really regret not being able to do it, because it's a great way to start the day. Also, your meditation is much calmer after you've done that. It really has an effect on the mind also. But yeah, again, this is the disadvantage coming from a culture where it is said you're not allowed to bow to idols. And then again, you need to know where this comes from. Because I think the God, whoever that was or is, wanted to protect his people from bowing to things that are not trustworthy. That's all. If that thing that they bowed to when this kind of law came about would have been trustworthy, I don't think that God would have said you're not allowed to bow. So it has nothing to do with that. But if you think that the Buddha's teachings are not trustworthy, then at all costs you should never bow. If you think that bowing is kind of harming your spiritual practice from your own tradition, you should not bow. And nobody forces you to bow. This is entirely your decision. None of the people who prostrate or who bow would judge you when you just sit down. Nobody. I don't know why then it becomes such a problem. That, you leave other people who have decided they want to bow, you let them bow. And because these holy objects, statues as a representation of the holy mind, is so much present in Buddhism. They make huge statues. Why? Because people get reminded of their potential. I just got from the FBMT, I got the message that about 4 or 5 meter high Padmasambhava statue has been airlifted to Laudo. So again, you know, you have the Western mind, you go like, they're crazy, they need special helicopters and all this, and it costs a lot of money. But to the people who live up there, they're Buddhists. You give them such a big present, because they can make positive karma with it, because they go and offer flowers, or they prostrate, they circumambulate, all this. See, if you see old Tibetan people, they believe in rebirth, so they can't do much anymore. But what they do, they're preparing for their next life. They're creating merit. They go and do circumambulation, they go with the prayer wheel, they say mantras, and they're very happy. Because they're preparing for the next life. If they wouldn't have any support, like statues outside, it would be very difficult to make offerings to some kind of energy. We don't know how it looks. This is why, because our mind needs forms. This is why these forms got, I can't say created, because it says that these forms appear to realized beings. And each of them represents something. You have Manjushri there. He's orange, he's young with a sword. He is a manifestation of an awakened mind's wisdom, cutting with the sword through ignorance. Then you have Vajrasattva there, which is white. It's the Buddha, which is the specialist for purification. You use that one as a support when you do like serious purification practices. You visualize that one either on top of your head, sending purifying light, or in front of you. Over there you have Tara, which is green. So that is a manifestation of a Buddha's actions. This is why she already has 1 foot down. And also there, each of them represents a color and a direction and an element. So Tara is green, which is the element of wind. So the wind is very fast in coming to help. Yeah, and it's a female Buddha. Then over there is another Vajrasattva. He's Yabyum, so he has a consort. So then also you go like, what? They're having sex in the temple. Come on. Is it? Yeah, I think he's in. I can't see so clearly from here, but I think he's in union, isn't it? Yeah. So what does it mean again? What is this union? This union is the union of yin and yang, the union of male and female energies, the union of compassion and wisdom. So in Tibetan Buddhism, the wisdom side is represented as the female side. When the women hear this, they're very happy. And then when I say, but then the method side or the compassion side is represented as the male side, then they go, what? Like, come on, you know, we have to divide it, so make up your mind.
What about that picture?
That's Shakyamuni Buddha. He's the historical Buddha.
He looks
Like a female.
Yeah, it's like an awakened being doesn't have like a distinct sex anymore. So that's why. Because what? Because of the breasts, you mean? Yeah. But it's not really like breasts like women have, is it?
Well, yeah, it is.
It is. Okay, so he's not a female, that's Shakyamuni Buddha. And whom do we have over there? I can't see. I think it's Chenresig, it's the Buddha of compassion. So the Buddha of compassion is a manifestation of a fully awakened mind's compassion. Then also, you know, the Buddhas, if you look, this is the Tibetan representation of Shakyamuni Buddha. If you look a Burmese Buddha or a Thai Buddha or a Sri Lankan Buddha, they all look different. So don't get so hung up on this is exactly how he looked. We don't know. Yeah. So the Tibetans can relate to that figure. They can also, they don't mind as long as, because that's what the Buddhists actually understand. So if you, for example, if you're in Bodhgaya, there's a lot of temples there because Bodhgaya is the place where the Buddha attained enlightenment. So there's a lot of temples, like from all the Buddhist traditions. So you go on pilgrimage to all the temples, you make offerings, and again, it creates a very happy mind. You buy something and you offer it without wanting anything back. Offering is a very, very big practice in Buddhism, and it's nice. It's nice. It creates a happy mind. Yeah. Just look when you go into a church or into a, I don't know, synagogue. I've never been in a synagogue.
Yeah, you have many
Do you make
rituals.
offerings?
You have many Jewish rituals that they're supposed to make you happy and
Yeah, so
joyful.
they do or they
Even
don't.
here now in Sukkot, when they finish reading the Torah,
Yeah.
so they go outside and they dance and they sing with the
Yeah,
book.
good. No?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this is a ritual too.
Exactly.
Yeah.
As I said at the beginning, you can do without this, but it's a help. If you know what it means and if you can relate to it. If you can't relate to it, you don't need it. You see, when you're like at the time of death, or when you're really in a bad state, you might not be able to do all these intellectual trainings anymore as we do, like meditation, having the mind focused and all that. And then just calming down and saying a mantra, this can become very, very helpful. Yeah. So this is what we do. But it takes time, and it's very important that you actually know what you're doing, because otherwise it really becomes just an empty ritual. But it is not. So, okay? Or do you have more questions with that? Are you okay with that? Okay. There we have like different, okay, what I didn't explain. We have, in the middle is Tara again, it's this female Buddha who is, it's very good that you start to, when you are about to have projects or things like that, then you make offerings to Tara. And then here you have Padmasambhava at this side. He's the one who brought Buddhism to Tibet. And then the other one with that pointed hat is Lama Tsongkhapa. He's the one from which we have the practice from. And he has this practice from Lama Atisha, who was an Indian scholar who was invited to Tibet and wrote, like, from all the teachings of the Buddha, he made this one text which is called the Lamb for the Path, which he divided the practices into 3 levels. We're still on the lowest level. Like, the lowest level is there in order for you to have a good rebirth. That means you rejoice about the life you have now, you think about impermanence and death. Tomorrow we think about karma. And so if you take care of your actions now and you purify the ones that you have already done, the negative ones, you will have a good rebirth, because that is the cause. Yeah. So you would have a good rebirth every time round, but then all of a sudden we start to recognize, yeah, we have precious human rebirths, but still have negative emotions and all this. So then you start to look what is not good in this precious human rebirth, and then you start to work with your negative emotions. First we work with the negative actions. That's easier than to work with the intentions that stand behind it. So first we learn to abstain from negative actions. Then you start to work with your negative emotions. Why is it easier then? Because your life has become fairly calm. You're not in difficult situations anymore. Yeah? So you start to work with anger, attachment, and then especially with this ignorance of believing in a self-existent I. So you abandon these negative emotions, then that would mean you get out of this cyclic existence. You're not reborn under the control of karma and delusions. You can decide whether you want to be reborn or not. So that's the middling stage. I want to get out of samsara. And then the highest stage is I want to get out of samsara, or I want to get out of this cyclic existence. Because why? Because I want to be of benefit to sentient beings. Because as long as I have negative emotions, I cannot really benefit them. Yeah, it's like, as long as I'm stuck in a swamp and somebody else is stuck in there with me, I cannot take them out. The description of how ordinary beings circle in samsara is in another very short Lam Rim text, which is called the 3 Principal Aspects of the Path. And there it says, when you have to think of your mother, swept away by the 4 powerful rivers, being bound by delusion and karma, in the cage of self-grasping ignorance, and shrouded in the darkness of the night. So this is, we see the situation of other beings that have been our mothers as being totally swept along. They've fallen into the river of birth, old age, sickness and death. Everybody knows that. not only that, they are they're not only in that river that is very strong, their hands are also bound by delusion and karma, and they're in an iron cage on top of it of self-grasping ignorance, and the mind is totally dark also, not seeing what it is, so it's in the middle of the night. So it's a very difficult situation. Now it's not only the mothers who are in that situation, it's also us.
Very difficult.
So in order to get them out of there, we need to get out ourselves first. So as long as we are swimming next to them, also like this and in that cage and in the middle of the night, there's not much hope. So this is then when you start to develop bodhicitta. Okay, so today we were looking at, then there's another question about medicine Buddha practice. Not sure, we'll see, I think it will be difficult. Yeah. But medicine Buddha practice is so easy to do. You sit down and you...
Every day.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm
So,
doing, but
mhm.
so maybe
What is tomorrow? Because tonight we do the days absorptions, and tomorrow is purification. Maybe we can do. Yeah, it's a bit out of context. That's the thing, because we don't have that much time. Medicine Buddha is a blue Buddha that we use for mental and physical sickness, but also for projects. Again, it's very simple. We just recite the names of these Buddhas, mentally prostrate as we recite, and make offerings to them. So also we need to make special altar. That's the thing. So if you want to do it, there's enough rice. I still have the little plastic bowls. So if you want to make a medicine Buddha altar. If you want to make a medicine Buddha altar, you're very welcome to do it. But when one does medicine Buddha practice, it's really good to do it all together, because it's Kriya Tantra, and so it's good to do everything that goes with it. Again, it's placebo, that's all it is. It's ritual. So if you are so strong that you think you can do without rituals, in any moment, I mean, I bow to you. Because we have so many rituals that we have gotten used to, that we use. Yeah? Our mind is geared up for these things. So this is why in spiritual practice we use it to be of benefit. So, but then at the end we have to throw them all out. If you want to attain full awakening, all these things you have to let go of, because they're all from the conventional side only. But so these rituals, they're a little bit like a boat to cross the river. But if you want to go to the other shore, you need to leave the boat behind. So you can also jump into the river and try to swim. This is what you can also do. And we're so lucky, or maybe so unlucky in the Western in the West here, we have access to all these different rituals. Zen, Thailand, Korea, Burma, Tibetan. So you choose whatever suits you best. Yeah? And none of this is really true. None of it. But it helps. It helps to support. Okay, so we did this morning. Do we have what we need in order to go on that spiritual journey? What do you think? What is your conclusion? Do you have what you need? Huh?
Yeah.
Yeah, you have interest, you have somebody that is giving you the method, you have a healthy body, you're not in a hell realm, it's not forbidden to do it, you don't have to fight for food and drink, you're not just interested in pleasures, and you have companions around you. Of course you have everything. Unless you're sitting here with a very negative mind and you go, oh, how can I blow up this temple? Then you won't have it. But as long as you have a mind that is happy to be here, then you have it at the moment. So you have all the conditions to go on that spiritual journey. Then the next question was, will it last? Then we came to the conclusion that
No.
Not always.
no, it will not last. So if I want to use it, better start to use it now. So again, don't forget, This is now we're having the problem here when people think that this text is for beginners. This text is very good for beginners because you see the structure of the path. But what it is for people who are on the path, so that it kicks them in the bum, so that they get going. This is what this text is for. This text is a meditation manual, so that you do these practices, so that you go step by step. So it doesn't start with impermanence and death, because that will make you too depressed. It is very skillful. First it starts, hey, you have everything you need to go on that journey. So first it creates a very happy mind. Then we can start to look at negative. Then we can start to look at impermanence and death. Yeah.
How long do we need to meditate on each subject?
Until your mind goes that way. Until your mind, every morning you wake up and you go very happy. Wow, I have precious human rebirth. How do I want to use it? And then you abstain from all negative actions, you only do positive actions, and you do everything you do for the benefit of others. So, that will last a long time.
Keep us busy.
But we have time. Again, as I said, if you really want to go to the end, it's not, one lifetime is not enough. So if you think you can practice this a few months and then, this would be like saying, for how long do I need to eat? 1 week, 2 weeks, and then I can stop? No. As long as the body still needs food, you need to eat. Now there are beings who have highly realized who live off energy. Because their mind is so subtle that mind has an influence on the body that the body doesn't need gross food anymore, but we're not there. So again, we can be very inspired by these beings and say, but they don't need to eat. Well, but I need to eat. It doesn't help me that they don't need to eat. Yeah. So when you feel the mind pulling into that direction, that we are really aware of death without freaking out, taking every minute in order to celebrate life for what is for, then you can stop meditating on precious human rebirth and impermanence and death. When you feel your mind is still going into wanting to do negative actions, then you still need to meditate on what it does, like the quote, law of cause and result. Then when you feel that I'm pretty safe from doing negative actions, we get the list tomorrow, then you can stop meditating on karma. If your mind, whenever there is danger, you take refuge in the Buddha, Dharma and Sangha, automatically. Like automatically you behave like a Buddhist, meaning you become a non-harming person. Then, and your goal is liberation from suffering and the causes of suffering. Then you can stop meditating on refuge. And then when it comes to bodhicitta, when this very innate feeling that we have, the wish for my own happiness, is for all sentient beings, then you can stop meditating on bodhicitta. You see, at the moment, all the actions that we do, they are for my benefit. Yeah. When you go to eat food, you pick not necessarily what is good for you, but what you like. You're not looking at the pots and thinking, there's not so much of this, so maybe, although I like it, I shouldn't take too much of it, because otherwise there won't be enough for everybody. This is not a very natural thought that you have at the beginning. With time you have it, and then with time it's really funny, all the good things, they stay, and whatever usually people don't like so much is eaten. Because the attitude has changed. I'm taking from the things that probably nobody will take, and also, last piece of cake or things like that, it always stays. I made an experiment once, because when I was in India, like at the beginning, things like Bounty, Mars, Snickers, you could not buy them in India, but you could buy them in Nepal. So sometimes people who came from Nepal would bring these things, and I don't like chocolate. I mean, I can eat it if I need to, and sometimes I actually have a bit of a craving for a bit of chocolate, but it's quite rare. But since chocolate is such a universal thing that everybody should like, so then somebody brought me a bar, like a bounty bar. and it was just before the meditation on attachment. So I came in, it was a tushita, maybe 70 people participating, and I just very carelessly kind of, this is the banana, I just threw it on the table like this because I didn't want to eat it anyway. And I saw these young people's eyes going like, "Ugh." And then I said, look at you. You don't even know what's inside. You just see the wrapper. This is how we're hooked. You see a piece of paper and your attachment is already flaring. Your desire. And so I said, okay, now there's usually bounties is two bits. So I said, either I give the whole bar to one person who really wants it, or I give it to two people because there's two parts, or I cut it up into 70 pieces, which I did. It was very tiny pieces, but it's possible. So I put it on the, like there. It's not, the tushita is not like here, you have tea and coffee, but that's it. In the tea corner, you don't have cookies. You have a shop where you can buy them, but no, it's not being provided like this. So I said, now you can either say, you can take as many as you want, it's up to you, or you can think, I leave mine for somebody else. At the end we had about half left. And then we were going, what is a happier mind, being able to leave it for somebody else or eating it? And everybody came to the conclusion, it's a happier mind if you leave it for somebody else. So this is the Buddhist way. Buddhists are terribly boring, like you have the whole day off, two Buddhists, you go, what shall we do today? Oh, I don't mind, anything is fine, you decide. At the evening they're still at home. Because they really don't mind. Or what do you want to eat? I don't mind, just whatever is in the fridge, whatever comes comfortable to cook, just cook it. And they're very happy. But they're boring. You ask a Buddhist, how are you? Usually it's fine. And that's it. Conversation finished. So this is how you will become. If you become a Buddhist. You become ordinary, not extraordinary. But the thing is, when you become really ordinary like the High Lamas, then you become very extraordinary, because not many people are normally ordinary like this, down to earth, very logical, not disturbed by anything, kind of, So if you feel inspired that you want to become like that, that's fine. That's what the Buddhist practice will give you peace of mind. A peaceful mind. A mind that is not disturbed by having done negative actions, no guilt, and a mind that is inspired by being able, not as a martyr and not as a goody-goody person, to help others. Just for the sake of helping others, not because you want anything back. Just because they find pleasure in doing it. They find their happiness in being of benefit to others without wanting anything back. So that gives you tremendous peace of mind, a meaningful life. And we can see it when people die. If they think they had a meaningful life, they die very peacefully. If people think it was a bit of a waste of time, I have a friend who works in a hospice, like with dying people. She's an art therapist. So started asking people, when they have, we feel they have problems dying. And sometimes people say, they die with this thought, is that it? Is that what the human life is all about? All this struggle? And then to leave everything behind? All this running, all this stress, all this frustration, all these disappointments, and now the biggest one, I have to leave everything behind. Is that it? Is that all? Yeah, that's all. Worldly life, that's it. You do a lot of effort to build things up for what? In order to leave them behind. But you can still have a very nice life, as long as you don't expect to get these things to make you happy. Then you can still do them. And it's good to do these things also, But it doesn't have to become the purpose of your life. so we have what we need, it will not last, then we need to see, okay, what happens when we die? What comes after? So this is what we do tomorrow. What determines what comes after is our karmic actions. But then Tibetan Buddhism are the only ones who can describe what happens at the time of death. At least that's the only philosophy that I've found this. And this can be very, very valuable because at the time of death, reality changes. Because what we used to have body and mind, and the mind that we have is quite gross. It's totally dependent on the senses. We're not used to have a mind that functions without senses. You know, people sometimes ask me, how would the world look if one could not see, not smell, not taste, not touch, and not hear? They say, well, I don't know. Yeah. The way we interpret the world is very much depending on these senses. So then, of course, a horse or a dog or a cat has totally different experience, let alone a fly or a worm. They have totally different senses. And again, we think that the world that I see, that's the real one. What the dog sees, that's not real. My world is not real and the dog's world is real. Because we can never experience anything outside of the mind. So this question also people ask, especially in Israel, but how does the world exist without minds? Well, we will never know. The only world that you can experience is through your mind. How can you experience an object without mind? It's impossible. Yeah. So then we can see the same object. At one point it is really beautiful and we can't bear to be separated from it. And a little bit later it's so disgusting that we throw it away. And the object hasn't changed. So what has changed? Huh?
You.
What has changed?
Mind. Mind.
The attitude towards it. So attachment is turned into aversion because disappointment, because you thought that this cup is going to make you happy. And so it makes you happy at the beginning, but then that changes into, oof, but it's just a cup. Yeah. And then you want the happy feeling, so you need to buy another cup, and then another one, and another one, and another one, and we start doing that with human beings. It's not the right partner, I go get another one. I wonder how long it will take until we start to exchange children. I don't want them, they're not what I expected them to be. Let me get some new ones. Can I give them back, please? A friend of mine, they got a puppy dog, and they had it was a Labrador. So the first one they had was really calm, and then the next one they got was so excited and jumping everywhere, no way of training it. So they asked if they can go and give him back to the kennel where they are both. Okay, so if you look on page 13. So now this is a little bit funky because also you say, where is this coming from? So it is coming from the tantric teachings where the meditators work with subtle energy bodies and subtle energy winds, prana, chi, yeah, and channels. So this is how they found that this happens at the time of death. It also happens when we go to sleep, by the way. It also happens when you faint. Yeah. Do we have a spare text? Yeah, anyway, you know it by heart probably. So the mind, yeah.
When we fall asleep, how come we're completely unconscious of it?
Huh?
How come we're completely unconscious of the whole process?
We're not completely unconscious of it, it's just that nobody tells us. How many of you have ever fainted? Okay. Do you remember what happens? All of a sudden, like the earth doesn't support you anymore. You have that feeling. Then you have the feeling as if your hearing goes. And then you have a feeling of like little sparks in front of your eyes. Yeah, do you remember?
No.
No, okay.
It's really fast and
only once?
once.
Yeah, then it doesn't work. You see, don't remember. I had a period in my life where I just used to faint, just like that.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah? Somebody said me too. Who?
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. When I was around 20. you know, sometimes during work, sometimes in the nightclub, I would just be gone. And the thing is, because then you're not conscious anymore. But when I heard this, I thought, wow, this is what it is. The only thing is, I only remembered to the little stars, you know, to the little sparks, and then gone. And usually there's no pain, nothing. You fall, but you don't feel any pain. And then you wake up and you have a moment of total openness because you were in the clear light. And if I would have known then what I know now, I would have meditated on emptiness. And I thought, wow, that is the natural state of the mind. But then you're lying on the ground and then you see all these faces above you and you're like, oh, it happened again. And then the ego, the I, comes back in. Because in the clear light there is no feeling of I, there's just space. So when there's no feeling of I, there's no fear. So we're not totally unconscious of it. Also when you are with dying people, sometimes they describe these signs. So when you know the signs, you become very, open-minded, and you listen to what they say. So when I describe these signs, and this is, I have the good fortune to having to describe them many times, or to many people. So very often, at one point, a young man said, "Oh, this is what my grandfather experienced," because he was screaming and he was saying, "I'm being sucked into a toilet, like this feeling of falling, and there's nothing to hold me." So then everybody was trying to explain to him, no, look, you're lying on the bed and you're safe, don't worry. But that's what he experienced. So the more they were trying to give him a different experience from what he was experiencing, the more frustrated he became. If you would have been able to tell him, yeah, I know, that's normal, and the next sign will be this, he would have calmed down. There was also a sister of somebody, the brother was dying, and he was really in his last stages, and he opened his eyes in panic and he said, "I'm falling." And because she had heard that, she said, "Yeah, I know, this is normal." He closed his eyes totally to calm down and died. So we're not totally unconscious of it. We just don't pay attention to it because we think it's just pure fantasy, or we cannot relate to what the dying person is saying. Also, not many of us have such deep absorptions that you can train this, and you have the experience. I don't.
Oh, I'm saying when you go to sleep, you experience it, right?
Yeah, but not consciously.
Yeah.
In meditation, you can experience that very consciously. So this is what the meditators train for, to train this process so that they don't miss the clear light. Yeah. So this happens every night when we go to sleep. It happens when you sneeze also, but very fast, very quick. And it happens in orgasm. This is why orgasm feels so good, because all the energy channels open and the I disappears because there's no more thoughts. So next time you have an orgasm, look how you feel. Try to experience that total openness. You would be ready to die for this other person, no problem, until he turns around and starts snoring. Then again, this openness is gone because I comes back in. Oh, I also want to sleep. If you would stay in that open space, you would think, oh great, he's sleeping, he will be rested tomorrow. You wouldn't worry about you. Yeah. So this is it. This is why we're so attached to these things. To orgasm, for example. Because that's what happens. We come very, very close to our nature in orgasm. Or when we go to sleep, there's this moment of clear light before the dreaming starts.
What is the clear light?
Clear light is when everything has absorbed. We will come to that. The nature of the mind is clear light. Yeah. Okay, so we just go through the elements. So each of these elements, one after the other, loses their power to support the body. The body is still alive, kind of. You're still breathing, but you have different experiences. So the first element that absorbs is the earth element, the aggregate of forms. Don't worry about the mirror-like wisdom and all this, it's too complicated. But it has to do with the I sense. So dying people, sometimes, as I said, they have a feeling of falling. Same thing as we have when we go to sleep at night.
Right, it happens sometimes just before you fall asleep.
Or after you've been asleep for